Um, yeah. So today's so basically in the EVS services as well as in EVS in the final year, the SEM 9, we'll be discussing a lot of different kinds of concepts which will help you even in your design dissertation. So some of the concepts you might they might be in the form of the strategies right now, and you could implement few of the strategies when you're doing the volume 2. So today we'll be talking about the integrated water management system, wherein this is a chart which talks about the planning and the water interfaces. So when you're doing with the land use planning, the kind of changes the land use alters the local hydrology. So hydrology is something, hydrology study one has to do just to understand what are the patterns of surface drainages. Even in terms of the land use planning, water scarcity and flood risk restricts the land development. So that is also one of an important and essential aspect. When you're talking about providing a housing within a land use planning, you need to understand that there has to be an additional water supplies and water and wastewater infrastructure also which is required. So it's the complete water cycle that you look at, wherein the water that enters your site, the utilization of the water, then its conversion into the wastewater, and how does it leave your site when it's in the form of the wastewater, or you recycle it and reuse within the system. And then the flooding of the property. So there will be a certain areas which are in the low line, and then they must be facing a certain kind of issues of urban floods. And urban floods is now a very frequent phenomena. Mumbai every year faces it, wherein as soon as there is a certain kind of a precipitation that goes higher than a conventional one, flood water starts collecting, and then most of the areas actually experience urban floods. In terms of the transportation, which is the water transportation, you need to understand also in terms of the surface runoffs and the diffuse pollution from the roads that come in. So it's both ways. Because there is a lot of pollution that comes on from the surface, and when the surface runoff happens, the kind of detergents, the kinds of engine oils or the petroleums that gets collected and then gets discharged into the groundwater, and that is also the onset of the groundwater contamination that a few of us might have come across when we are reading certain kind of papers, or understanding certain kind of architectural projects. Then the damage to the transport infrastructure which are being caused by the floods. Parks and recreationals which can act actually like sponges to that particular neighborhood or the region, wherein you talk about the increased water use for irrigation. Flooding in drought damages plants and playing fields. Then there is about economic development, which talks about the increased water demand and risk of pollution from the wastewater discharges. The whole idea of how do you, provide a service which is cradle to cradle and doesn't have a byproduct of waste. Then the whole idea of the water scarcity that can restrict the economic productivity. So that water stresses that you talk about, wherein you have to, instead of getting water, you have to buy, excess charges to avail the water resources. Then comes the urban agriculture, wherein you talk about the runoff containing fertilizers, pesticides, which can pollute the local water bodies. So, if there is kind of a farm pond, or if there is a kind of a lake, or natural kind of a depression which then converts into a pond, and that has been used for farming. And if there is a certain kind of contamination which is in the form of the excessive use of the fertilizer, the water scarcity restricts productivity in urban forms. So basically, then it's about the health, the water course pollution caused by the pharmaceutical waste. So in within industrial regions or areas, the kinds of waste that gets discharged into these, either in rivers or channels or streams, so that then eventually they get and they travel that entire waste into the sea. Waterborne and parasitic diseases are caused by contaminated and stagnant water. So, as per the standards, your water velocity has to be zero point 0.6 meters per second in even in the urban areas within the rivers, streams, so that the waterborne diseases are not being encountered. The more the stagnancy, more the chances of water getting contaminated. The waste is in terms of flooding of the waste collection sites again. So then the leaching happens. Imagine the entire Govandi, the dumping yard, and when there is an excess rainfall, and when that water comes out into the other peripheral areas, or there is a river that is, more than a river, it's just a stream that is cutting across and then entering the creek on the outer side. If you look at the Google image of the Devna dumping ground, so there is a leachate of methane, sulfur, all those kinds of chemicals that will be happening. Then, in terms of the energy, water treatment and distribution requires a reliable supply of water. The whole idea of the desalination to give you potable water, it is excessive in terms of energy usage. So, does it make sense? How do you try and mitigate what happens in terms of the byproduct, and how it places itself in this whole idea of the climate change is also becomes a questionable part. And then is the water resources are used for the energy generation, so you will have tidal power and things like that. So these are the various aspects where is being used. So the red ones are the ones which are the impact of the urban management sector on the water cycle, and the blue ones are the impact of the water cycle on the urban management service. So one is basically the service or sector. One is where it provides it as a services, but the other is also in terms of how does it how the red creates this kind of a pollution, and if they are not being treated well or considered well. So what is this one water approach, and what is this concept that has been come up in 2015 by the Water Environment Research Foundation, which talks about one water approach? Sorry, does anyone want to say anything? Hello, should I
No,
continue?
no.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, you can go.
So one water approach is basically in terms of, you must have heard about the idea of the livable city, which talks about the well-being of the city, which talks about, how good, one feels when they are living in the city. Like everything is accessible, whether it's in on the social aspect, economic growth is very good. The health and the well-being of the people or the community is also, to the power. There is access to all kinds of facilities, amenities. The infrastructure is very good and things like that. Then comes your provide reliable, secure, and clean water supply. There are so many parts of the city which still don't have, the water supply or the clean source of energy which is there. Then is the resilient to changes in climate and economics, wherein you talk about resilient cities in terms of what are their strategies which by which they can overcome the changes which are happening in the climate and the associated economic impacts. Use and reuse of natural resources efficiently. So whatever that we have in terms of the natural resources or the finite resources, use them very sensitively, use them very responsibly, so that there is very minimal loss or zero loss completely. So you're completely looking at a cradle to cradle approach. Then minimize the environmental pollution in terms of how do you discharge. So whatever gets used, okay, over a period of time in whatever form, it is going to convert into a certain byproduct which falls into waste. But then how do you upcycle it or recycle it becomes very important as architects and planners. These are other approaches wherein they talk about the integrated water cycle management, where they talk about not only look at the sources where it gets affected, but also look at the sources of these water cycles. Like, for example, the catchment areas. So, every time you have to look at a macro scale, which is a regional scale, meso scale, which is a regional scale, and which includes a long-term water resource management and planning. So whenever you are dealing with rivers, okay, or streams or any kind of water ecologies within your thesis, you need to first understand the catchment. Okay, so definitely the lot of problem happens and then gets piled up at the downstream, but upstream also becomes very important, especially when you're looking at particular rivers which were perennial, but over a certain kind of urban development, they might have gone into like a seasonal change wherein there are a certain time period wherein they go dry. So integrated water cycle management becomes very important. Also in terms of other cities, especially when you have Aurangabad where the aquifers work. So there is a certain kind of a cycle, water cycle, which is being created, and the interdependency of the water available at the end user is also depend on the catchment and the larger areas. So the regional studies become very important. Then comes your water sensitive urban design, which happens at the local scale or the built environment focus, wherein you really deeply study the land use plan and integrate a water sensitive urban design approach, wherein whatever that you do or implement in terms of the design has a certain kind of an approach towards how do they look at water. Maybe how do they register water and improve their ground levels, ground water levels, or it must be about how do you discharge the wastewater into another water body, and what is the kind of a treatments that you do. So there are strict norms which have been there in guidelines which your architects, planners, designers will have to follow to make sure it's a water sensitive urban design approach. And then is the water sensitive urban developments that you do on site scales or the built environment, wherein you also look at a particular programs which will help you elevate this whole idea of water sensitiveness. It acts like a catalyst to the entire project, wherein it harvests the water. It looks it gives a very different lens of looking towards water, and not only in terms of the usage part of it. This is another cycle which talks about the integrated water cycle management in detail, wherein there are three subsets which talks about sustainable water supply options. So definitely you have all learnt about rainwater harvesting and the surface water runoff recycling. Then the demand management plus the grey water and the wastewater recycling, where the wastewater itself. So what happens is generally when you are calculating, there is a certain kind of a water loss that's going to happen over this entire cycle. Okay, but then at least 80% of the water that you've used, okay, 80% of the wastewater is being able to be upcycled or recycled. Wastewater reduction and improved treatments. So your whether you want to go for your sewage treatment plants, whether you want to use phytoremediation, whether you want to use bioremedial methods or activated carbon filters. So there are different ways and different systems which are being available in the market. Depending on the requirement that you have, you can always scale it up and scale it down. And look at systems which give you that kind of flexibility and the function that you're designing for. Then comes your surface water runoff reduction and improved treatment. Wherein, like for example, if you take the example of a green certified building, whether it's a Leeds or it's Breham in UK, or it's Casby, or it's Blue Star in Australia. It's there are different green certifications, but each one has a water as one of the main feature or an element within, and there is a heavy weightage which has been associated with it. Now they clearly say that whatever water that has been uh, accumulated or that has been there onto your site has to get 100% recharged or has to get 100% harvested. So not a single drop of water should leave your site unharvested. So then how do you do this? What are the different kinds of strategies or elements, especially when you have vast amount of land, acres of land, and you're, building these huge projects? How do you do it? And then how do you look at it? And then the outer side, if you see, it's more in terms of programs, wherein, in the urban design, you're talking about the local identity, the sustainable building, community engagements, the microclimate, and the human comfort. The whole idea of the placemaking, where the water features and the arts can play an important role, where water becomes more in terms of an aesthetics, the open spaces and the recreational, the flood pathway integration, street highway designs, symbiotic land use planning. Now street and highway designs are important because whatever surface runoff that happens onto the roads and these streets can be captured by the rain gardens which are aligned onto the pathways. And then from there it can, or you can use swales as one of the strategies for it. The productive landscape is in another feature, which talks about that how landscape is not only about aesthetics and creating foreground and a background for the building, but it's more in terms of creating infrastructure, the local infrastructure efficiency you can, increase, wherein you talk about productive landscape or you talk about edible landscape. We'll be also looking at ecosystem services in one of the concepts, wherein we will talk about how the landscape actually has lots to offer, of in all aspects of different aspects. Then the habitat creation and enhancement, where you talk about ecologies or the ecosystems that thrive on such diverse landscapes that you are able to revive, restore, or maintain. Uh, Whenever we talk about the urban sensitive urban design, it's basically a component of nature based solutions wherein you deeply look at the soil, water, and the plant. So, your site analysis becomes very important because you need to understand the topography, you need to understand the geology of the place, you need to understand the hydrology and as well as the vegetation. So the whole physiology matters, and to respond to diverse environmental, economic, and social and climate challenges, wherein you do understand also the peripheral or the surroundings of the neighborhoods, the social aspects of it, whatever that you do onto that particular site. What is its impact onto the neighborhood? What is it impacts on the livelihoods of the communities which are engaged within that site? And then what are the climatic challenges which are there? It also involves the integration of the water cycle management with the built environment through the approaches of urban planning and design. So not necessarily everything will happen at a building scale. So we are also talking about shifting the scales. Any questions till now? Meenal, Sandeep, you want to add anything before we start showing them certain examples of it?
No, okay, I'll be taking up this next time in detail. So what you are doing is at a larger scale, and I'll
Yeah,
be doing it at a site planning level. So that
sure.
will continue next time onwards.
Okay.
Yeah, but you can continue
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
unless
you
some
can continue,
is there.
Kimaya, unless the
Okay,
students have any
sure.
questions
Yeah.
at this moment. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So basically, this is the water sensitive urban design approach which is being taken by the cities in Vietnam, where they talk about nature based solutions. So, whatever they are going to do, it is going to be natural based solutions. So, what they did is with the ADB assistance, they actually integrated the nature based solutions through the rehabilitation of their ponds. So, they first looked at the existing water ecologies across the cities of Vietnam, and then they started first was just on making a detailed itinerary that which are these water ecologies which are there, what is their current status. There were site visits, there were technical discussions, there were brainstorming sessions that were conducted to improve the urban design of the four Vietnam cities. So these were the pilot projects that they conducted. Now the best part about this initiative was it was getting each and every one on the board, and it was talking about a multidisciplinary approach. It was not a siloed approach wherein water engineers are working on their own, architects and planners who are associated with the associated lands around, they are working on their own, and things like that. So it basically allowed every one of them to come on board and share their experience as well as share their expertise. So they came up with this water sensitive urban design. What is this water sensitive urban design? It's mainly been referred to as WSUD, and it's very famous across countries now. Australia has also been working with the water sensitive urban design approach, wherein they involve the integration of the water cycle management within the built environment through urban planning and design. So there is natural water balance which is there. So we all know that there is precipitation, then there is a surface runoff, and then there is infiltration. When there is precipitation happening, there will be a certain component of evapotranspiration that occurs, okay, which is also the loss of water that is being considered. But what happens in an urban water balance? When you're talking about an urban water balance, we also have a piped water supply, which is your potable water supply, okay, which is and it's also referred to as a virtual water. So there is a precipitation. Again, it's a reduced evapotranspiration that happens because and reduced infiltration because the land or the surface is no more being porous. There will be a lot of hardscapes which are being done, and in especially in developed cities, right, where your pavements, your roads, your large open areas which are being paved, all are resultant of because or are the resultant of the urban development, but at the same time they've reduced the infiltration. And then there is a large volumes of poor quality runoffs that happens, and then there is a direct waste water discharge also that happens. Now, what the WSUD water balance cycle talks about? It talks about precipitation and evapotranspiration and the infiltration, which are the natural phenomena that are going to occur. Okay. But whenever there is a certain kind of a development which is water sensitive, it will allow you to certain runoff. Okay. It will also allow you to reuse the storm water. It will talk about responsible discharge of the wastewater and also reduce the potable consumption of the potable water. Simple things like, when you're brushing your teeth, you don't need to keep your tap on continuously. That's the simplest of the example. But a lot of us have the habit wherein you want the running water on and then you're brushing your teeth. There is so much of wastage of water that happens. The amount of cycles of flushes that we can control on in our cisterns, there is an amount of water quantity that is required, but most of it is in excess. So how do you reduce? And all these are being looked at in your green building traits. Along with these, now you require tools to implement the WSUD. Now, what are the different kinds of water management tools? And this is where your site comes in play. And I think Meenal is going to take each and every one of them in detail. Where you talk about the vegetated swale or the bioswale, okay, then which is nothing but it's a medium through which the water can be channelized. It can also be recharged and it can also be filtered to a particular extent. Then comes the surface detention or the bioretention basins, the cleansing biotopes, which are there using vegetation or the phytoremediation technique. Constructed wetlands are also there. The rainwater detention or the harvesting tanks, the flow control weirs that you create. Weirs are nothing but these kinds of gabion, they are not dams, but they are just cut across to reduce the velocity of the water. So they are called weirs. They are very shallow. Then there are green roofs, controlled outflow to channels, riparian landscape at waterfronts, and then the surface conveyance. So if you're looking at a particular project which involves a lot of particular kind of a site planning, okay, or you're dealing with an eco-sensitive zone, or you're dealing with not necessarily an eco-sensitive zone, but have a river that cuts across your site or is very in close proximity to the site. So these are the things that you will have to eventually look at and try and study and becomes a part of your site analysis. The sectional profile along the water edge improves the social and the ecological values in these areas. So this is still we are looking at the city of in Vietnam, wherein we are talking about how do you adopt new types of edge treatments and the other water sensitive urban design tools to help to improve. So a lot of you will be also cutting transects along your sites just to understand what is the topographical change. Are there any kind of depressions? What is the kind of vegetation which is there? In case there is a water body, how is the water body placed in terms of the other topographical or the contour leveling? In case I need to put in a particular kind of a programmatic intervention, what is its impact? Is it very close? What are the buffer zones? What is, if it's a river, what is the high flood line? What is the level of the flood that it reaches, so that you can then create your buffer zones accordingly. To reduce the soil erosion, what is the edge conditions that you do? So they came with a multiple edge treatment types. So it's not only one approach, it's not one size fits all. It's about customizing, and it's also about trying to investigate the field first, trying to understand the field, and then whatever is appropriate, you try and associate that with it. So whether you want to create the width of the river is so huge that you can actually give and revive the entire waterway. In terms of, there is a certain kind of transportation that you look for. Maybe you don't have to use diesel or energy used system. You can just have a boat that just steams through the entire waterway and reaches from one point to the other, or it acts more like a recreation or the leisurely activity. It thrives an entire ecosystem and becomes like a biodiversity hotspot, because there are certain kind of migratory birds that come in. So then how do you detail out the edge so that you do want to safeguard the certain kind of trees which are there? You want to also want people to experience it, but also you want the ecosystem or the biodiversity to thrive on it. So the edge conditions becomes very important. Then comes the applications wherein they are talking about, flexible enough to be inserted in different types. That also they have right from the rooftops till your ground level. Okay, they have been implementing certain kinds of strategies, especially trying to convert all your open spaces, semi-open spaces into these kinds of sponges which absorb, but they also help you to create this kind of a vegetation or a biodiversity which will create a microclimate for the entire city. So, in a way, when you try and implement these in small, small pockets, the larger impact is going to be seen in your urban heat island effect, wherein the even the city temperatures will be not so much high or increased by like 10 degrees, 7 degrees, difference would be reduced. So then how do you use, and plus your social quotient or your social recreational space value increases. So eventually then you are talking about a livable city. So if you could refer to the first diagram which starts with the whole concept of the livable city, and then how water becomes the center or the core from where it all starts integrating. So you are talking about all three levels. You're talking about the economic level. You're talking like more and more people will visit these kinds of recreational spaces. There is a certain kind of revenue generation that happens. So the maintenance of these becomes easier. So also whenever you are trying to improve in the professional world, whenever you're trying to create such kinds of or a scales projects, and especially in terms of planning and urban design, you should look at programs which are also converting or making numbers in terms of the economic growth, because then your system that you're implementing or you're thinking of implementing becomes self-sustaining. Also the kind of vegetation that you use are native, so that your quotient of maintenance or the quotient of uh, operation becomes lower. Okay, and then you talk about the storage. So all you look at the plazas, you look at the open spaces, and you look at the building level. So all scales are being treated well. And this is another, example of the Bishan Park, which is in Singapore. It's about the river that also cuts across. It's the story of an urban river. This is basically an image wherein the kindergarten pupils have just come for a excursion visit, wherein they are looking at the butterfly species which are there and the different kinds of flora and fauna that is there. So it talks about creating certain programs to basically touch young minds, so that you over a period of time you are being in a position to create uh, environmental ambassadors or ecological ambassadors for your own cities or countries that you inhabit in. This is about benefits of urban sensitive, water sensitive urban design. Again, same, the mitigation of the risks, improving water quality, how do you conserve water, how do you control soil erosion and sedimentation, the whole idea of mitigating the urban heat island effect that we saw, the carbon dioxide sequestration, which talks about, how do you build, like this is, Bhutan is the best example for it, wherein, Bhutan is carbon neutral. That is because whatever generation of carbon dioxide it does, everything has been carbon sequestrated by the forest that it has. So it has this beautiful balance, and that's how it's carbon neutral. And they have been really strict in terms of the footfalls that come in terms of the tourism, the amount of waste that has been generated to the tourism. So recently, in the last 10 years, they've been really working on very strict guidelines to do with the tourisms, and the kind of and also they have a certain kind of taxation, that they have heavy taxation that they have started. Restore and enhances urban ecosystems and biodiversity, improves community well-being and healthy living environment, stimulates local economies and create new jobs by creating recreation and tourism services, increase land value and government revenues. Uh, Simple thing. If you look at the map of Mumbai, we have four rivers cutting across, right? And most of these rivers also have, of course, there is an encroachment of an informal settlement, but few of the belts also have this certain kind of in housing, which is middle class or higher middle class housing that is along the banks of the river. Now, we do talk about and refer to a lot of these canal houses, or houses along the water in other countries, and really the land prices are overshooting there because you get the view of the water. So imagine if you revive the rivers of Mumbai, what happens? Your eventually the land value is going to eventually increase. So then you talk about those kinds of programs which are there, and then how do you also see, we are discussing this because it's also about, when you're discussing in your volume 1, you also talk about various policy level impact, right? What are the different kinds of policies that needs to be addressed? If they are existing, then what is it that is being working as a challenge or a hindrance to create particular changes in the cities that we are living in? Then they enhance the sustainable use of energy and urban resources, helps revitalization of the neglected areas and the urban regeneration which is there. This is the U City again, which talks about how do you new types of edge treatments and the WSUD tools. So basically, due to the surrounding hard embankment and years of receiving a mix of storm water and domestic water waste, the Slap River and the pond in the city suffers from poor water quality. The river has become narrow, inhibiting flow and accumulating heavy sedimentation of the ponds. Because of lack of daily water recirculation are reduced to standing water. The way of the embankment is built also discourages people from interacting with the water or natural environment. I hope now. So this is the story of across every water ecology across cities and countries, especially Asian cities and countries. And even I'm not denying that the West doesn't have. The West do have, but they have adopted a different way of looking at their embankments. Like for example, Thames River. Yeah, there is a certain kind of a hard embankment which is there. There is no direct association with the water. Yeah, but there are certain kind of institutional buildings, and then there is a promenade. So they go with the promenade approach because the way it cuts across these kinds of different regions within the city of London. But when you look at these, which are still in the developing state, there are different kinds of edges that can be looked at, and the whole exercise of just altering the edge and the different forms and looking at the impacts that each edges give makes sense. Yeah, because you want to just make sure that whatever that you do is giving a very less impact. Now, this is the Sen Pond, which is basically another case study wherein they looked at more community gathering points, were strategically looked, and they converted into a recreational space for the neighborhood. So people eventually started coming to it, wherein they actually introduced the broad walkways and the raised walkways. There was water cascading down the fall. It's also to do with the osmosis or the aeration, wherein you oxidize the whole water so that the uh, certain composition, the BOD and the COD of the water is being maintained. BOD is the biological oxygen demand and COD is the chemical oxygen demand, which is there. Now, all these are standards which are being prescribed by the CPCB, which is the Central Pollution Control Board in India. And there are certain standards which they talk about how much should be the COD, how much should be the BOD, and stuff like that. So they do talk about intermediate testing of the water. So it's not that the testing of water doesn't happen in the city. It does happen. Even in Mumbai, it happens, but it just goes as a record. Nothing happens, other than it. So they are. What the urban sensitive urban design approach allows uh, uh, the kind of development to channelize in a particular way, where these becomes your potential projects over a period of time, wherein you try and revitalize the entire space. Then vegetated swale to convey and treat the street runoff. So all the neighborhood runoff can also come here. Multi-tier stepping edge to be close to the water, so you can feel the water, you can sit along the water. And then there are platforms and decks for social activities that happen. There is wetland with water circulation system, which means there is a certain kind of filtration system which is inbuilt within that particular sand pond. Okay, so the water is never stagnant. There will be a certain kind of a channelization of the water sorry, not channelization, movement of water, which reduces the stagnation. Then the whole algae formation. So algae formation will definitely be there, but the amount of algae formation can be controlled if the water is not stagnant. Yeah, and then there are other of course aquatic plants which can be introduced, and then the fishes and all these which can create the turbulence and create an ecological kind of a place. This is the Lap River, which is again, so there are these water ponds as well. Now, this Lap River, if you see, it's an urban river. So, whenever you are dealing with an urban river, It's 30-meter buffer that they see within an urban setup. Now, if you look at Mumbai and try to get your 30-meter buffer, it's next to impossible because there are immediate buildings like BKC itself won't give you the 30-meter buffer. So other strategy that we see in our cities is basically they put the road next to the river edge, and that road acts like a buffer. Doesn't act like a buffer in an environmental sensitive sense, but that is their way of negotiating with the land because we look at land as capital rather than looking water as capital, and then looking at how do we over a period of time overcome these kinds of challenges and constraints the urban cities are facing. So here they have given the riparian edge, which is nothing but a natural vegetation edge. Gabion walls are very good. So they act as embankments, okay, but the porosity of it actually allows a lot of ecosystem to thrive on. Then the natural edges, which has an ecological value, they are being introduced. And then there are social platforms like decks and all, the amphitheater and stuff like that. With the viewing deck, which introduces you basically, there is a public gathering spot that you create. Uh, Also, the slope reinforcement has been taken care of with the riparian edge and things like that. And the surface runoffs have been taken care of with your vegetated swales to convey sand and treat street runoffs. Only thing is the amphitheaters that happens at the corners sometimes, if there is an ingress of excess water, okay, it might overturn the amphitheater, and that's why there is this natural edge with the ecological value which is created as a bulge exactly on the opposite side, because then it absorbs the impact of the excess water that comes in. Also, there will be a lot of sedimentation of the soil that comes in, especially in Mitti. So if you know the terrain of Mithi, till it hits the SCLR, it has a very steep gradient. And after SLAR, it flattens. And that's why when it actually comes where the BKC part is, there is a lot of soil deposition that happens because of the change in the elevation. When we talk about urban river ecologies, we'll deal that in detail then. This is about looking at the again the whole Min city, which is there, and but it also talks about that these are the greenscapes which are there along the rivers, and then how do you safeguard those? Because when the river is been meandering through this dense urban fabric, and when you have patches of greens, which are these grasslands and water ponds which are there. So this is the, I don't know whether you can see my cursor, but I'm pointing out at this first image, which okay, which actually talks about how this entire stream empties itself into the uh, river. Now imagine the way it comes, it's get lost somewhere here, but it is going to collect all the wastewater, and if it's not treated well, it's going to empty itself out here, which is a junction again, which is again going to create a problem and also affect the flow of the river. Um, it talks about the Govap Culture Park, which is approximately 37 hectares, and it's unique, which is densely populated of the metropolitan area. But it's currently underutilized. So they are actually talking about how do you reutilize the space and create it more effectively for the city. Then is about mitigating the flood risks. Okay. Now, when the topography of the park designed to slope down towards the water with multi-level floodplains, so you design the entire park in such a way that it has a certain kind of a flood risk management for the entire city. Okay, so it not only absorbs the impact of the flood, but it also helps in removing the flood water as fast as possible, or the receding of the flood water as fast as possible, so the damage is being less. So these are the various they have created in terms of the terraces or the levels, and that's the cross section that they have created. So even if the water level in the heavy storm area, that's the height of the water floodable extent. Okay, now always understand, whenever you're doing studies of the rivers or any kind of water bodies, you'll always get a 50-year time period or a 100-year time period. So whatever data that you have, you'll always get it like a 50-year flood line and the 100-year flood line. And then you have passive activities to active activities, wherein you have certain kinds of accesses to those activities, and then as you go towards closer to the water body, it just reduces. And then there are soil bioengineering stabilization strategies which are also being implemented. Then they talk about the Tarbin River side, which is again it's the edge of the river within the urban scenario, wherein how do you try and create the edge? Okay, so you have the phase one where you upgrade the canal to take full capacity of the water conveyance and build an arterial road above for better land optimization. So they have taken the entire walkway upwards. The phase two, they talk about defining the boundaries, which are drier and wet patches, the flood-proof development with ample water frontages. So once you do the inventory mapping and understanding the field or studying the field, you'll understand which are the areas which are flood-prone and how do you try and create more water frontages to be flood-proof. Then is the phase three where you talk about the rejuvenate of the waterways and upgrade the riparian environment, applying the WSUD, which is the water sensitive urban design concept. Implement the WSUD tool throughout the site with multiple connections of the waterways, which is the fourth, wherein you not only connect only the point A and point B, but you actually cut across and what are the different kinds of connections that you go for. So it also gives the users across the city the flexibility to access the water body. It's not a very controlled entry and association with the water body, but it's more in terms of naturally transitional spaces which are being created. They are being curated, but they come across in such a way that it's a natural way in exploring the water body because you have multiple site accesses. This is about how they improve the secondary green development projects, where they are actually looking at what happens to the backyard of these houses, which are facing the water body, and then the edges, especially because otherwise, if not informed now, they all will be taken up by the urban development plans in terms of where eventually you'll see reclamation happening. There are lots of these concrete buildings which come up. This is the image from the brainstorming workshop that happened. The key lessons that they learned, definitely there has to be a political will in terms of leadership and planning. You need to align your thoughts as planners and designers along with the political will, because they are the ones who are going to execute it, they are the ones who are going to fund it. So the narrative building or your design brief becomes very important because they are eventually interested in understanding the numbers or the revenue generation that happens, who is going to maintain it, what is the outfall, how does it help, and so on and so forth. Then the communication and the participation becomes very important, because you need to get all stakeholders on the same platform. Siloed approach just doesn't work. The consensus of rehabilitation and expanding the water system in the cities as an essential foundation for building urban resilience is needed. So the awareness on the advantages of the WSUD you will have to create, which means you'll have to also run certain kind of capacity building programs, not only for the professionals but also for the users, or rather all stakeholders. The knowledge and the design, the international knowledge and the design should be leveraged for local context. Highly capable local consultants and contractors. So, what is the structure that you would like to put for a project of such scale? What is the kind of team? Definitely, it's a multidisciplinary team, but under what heads that you do work with. Like for example, I remember. In Leipzig, city of Germany. So they are reviving the whole city. So there was a certain kind of population that had left the city over a period of time after, especially with the Berlin Wall that happened, where it divided the west and the south of the Berlin. Sorry, east and the west of the Berlin, and so now they are working on the restoration plant of the Leipzig, but the German government works very clearly with the NGOs or the consultants who are actually on the field. So all the decision making that happens is at the government level, but they have hired private consultants, private NGOs who are already part of the field. So the negotiation that has to happens very quickly and swiftly, and also the control is very much efficiently managed because the people know the NGOs and the consultancies that they are working with. The consultancies and the NGOs also know, but the responsibility of the NGOs and the consultancies increase because they become the bridge between the end users and the ones who are going to implement the strategy. So, but then everything doesn't have to come under one umbrella. It's basically talks about a decentralized approach. So it also gives a lot of potential for consult designers, planners to put in more proposals and then evaluate. So the government has its own team of designers, planners who will evaluate these projects which are being presented, and then they will help them execute the entire project. The city blueprint approach is another approach which talks about the trends and the pressure frameworks. So, what are the main city's challenges which are there? What should be the city blueprint performance framework, wherein you talk about how adequate is the city's water management? So, you first start questioning with the kind of facility that you have and try and identify the gaps and the loopholes rather than tritely getting from this top down approach, wherein that this is not there, which has been decided by the top notch, and then it's just been tried to implement it at the grassroots level. Then the governance capacity framework, where can the city's water governance be improved? Okay, is the structure, like for example, in India, no one knows the owners of the river. It's definitely the central government, but when you go into the cities, whether it's Kanpur, it's Delhi, or it's Mumbai, uh, there is a certain kind of an administrative guideline that should be given in terms of managing these kinds of water ecologies. So, what's the governments or what's the policies which are being involved? Then we talk about dimensions where you talk about knowing. So then your aspiration, which is your wanting, and then how do you enable, which you implement. So multi-level network potential, financial viability, implementing capacities is something that you look at when you're talking about implementation plan. When you're talking about the wants, which are your aspiration, you want to consider everything under the sun, right? You want to make sure there's a stakeholder engagement process that is happening, because then you talk about protection of the core values, the culture nature aspects that come into play, the management ambition, wherein you talk about the realistic managements versus the ambitious managements. What is it that you can achieve, and what is it's still at this kind of a dreamy level where you want it, but it's very difficult to achieve it. And then the agents of change, you try and identify who are the ones which will act like a catalyst to change the entire game, the entrepreneurial agents, the collaborative agents, visionaries. So these kinds of various think tanks, or the kinds of teams that are being created to deploy certain kinds of projects in the cities start coming into play. This is the governance capacity framework. I'm not going in detail, but it talks about the indicators. Okay, so whenever you are talking about different strategies, these are good in terms of monitoring, tools. So you might not use it, or you might use it, or you talk about, you just mention it in your volume one that the monitoring. There could be different frameworks which can be suggested by the monitoring body for the monitoring of this. This is the project by Stephen Hall Architects, which is the water treatment facility. It's in United States. So, what I liked about this project is that the brief was given as a water recycling plant, but the architect actually converted the entire brief into this kind of a public park, wherein the process that he is designing for, he opens that entire process for the city to experience, and creates this entire kind of arrays, like sets of chlorophyll gardens, wave meadows, blushing marsh, filter courts, wetland ponds, turbulences lawn. So the city itself understands what kind of processes it undergoes and how the water reaches. Okay, a lot of times we are not aware of certain kind of processes and systems, and that's why we are ignorant about it. It's not about that it's inbuilt in us, but it's just that because it doesn't come to us in day-to-day life. So here he talks about following the natural laws of gravity. He looks at water flows across the site and within the purification plant. There are garden filters and storm water, store storm water to prevent runoff of neighboring sites. They talk about the water courses through its turns and transformations towards its clean, state, it creates micro-program potential within the vast space of the new park. It aligns along the base of the silver as the Finnish water pumps, which distribute the clean water to the region. So this is the delayering that he does, wherein you talk about a collaborator's landscape strategy places 70% of the building below grade. Okay, which is can you see it in dotted? Okay, only the one that you see in silver is being exposed of the building. Otherwise, rest is all embedded within. Okay. 40,000 cubic yard of displaced soil from the building excavation is used to create this new topography. So whatever gets excavated has been used on site. There is zero wastage or zero amount of soil that goes out as a debris from the site. Topography harnesses natural hydrological processes to improve the water quality. So it talks about the water cycles which are there. And then it talks about the diverse landscape which becomes the neighborhood amenity. Okay. Wherein there are pre-existing wetlands, there are lakes, islands, peninsula, bit, it just creates these kinds of smaller miniature features within this entire kind of in diverse landscape. So this is during the construction, that's the building that you see, which is there. Now this is actually the building of this wheel. Let's look at the scale, look at the human figure, and look at the scale of this wheel, which is being constructed here. Okay, and that's the depth, and this is all the water that is going to run through, because you're talking about the water management system for the entire city, and that's how it looks like when it's right up for functioning, wherein you were seeing this edge and you were actually seeing this pathway which was getting constructed. I'm just going to turn back for you all to just get your reference points so you understand how you are oriented. So this is that building which is in the shape of the water droplet, which is this here. Okay, and that's the water channel, and this is the water channel, and wherever he has created these small culverts to cut across. The other important thing that he has used is the vegetation. So the vegetation that you've used is very dynamic, because as per the seasons, the flowering color changes. So every time you visit the space, it's a very different experiential quality it offers to you. So the park always has something new to offer in terms of as it moves from one seasonal change to the other. Also, in terms of the material that has been used, you know how the building actually, sits within this kinds of a dense landscape, and it doesn't look like standing out. Otherwise, the scale of the building is quite humongous, but it's just the way it sits in, and the kind of material that has been used, it's just gels well. The ecological integrity or the watershed in microorganism is something that he's been talking about, where the new typology stabilizes using bioengineering methods. So he talks about ecological integrity, and he also talks about planting schemes using native species, which requires no fertilizer or pesticides, so reducing the facility's impact downstream. Because all the water is eventually you're right high up, right, and then the entire city has to get water supply. The landscape is designed to be a didactic microorganism of the entire regional watershed. The swales guide the site runoff through a series of discrete landscapes, including farmlands, meadows, and valley streams, before collecting it in a new pond that recharges the groundwater table. Meandering footpaths allow visitors to move through this narrative and consider how water interacts with the land. So, this is basically how the conceptualization of the entire project happened. Like how Stephen Hall imagined it by just getting a brief which talked about a water recycling plant. It could have been any other conventional recycling plant. The other one is the Saltgrad water treatment plant, which has been done in Denmark, and the year of execution is 2017. This is again, it's one of the features. If you see the way these buildings sit within the landscape, becomes very important. So the Solgrid Climate and the Environmental Park, which is serving the city of Hilroyd in northern Zealand. It basically talks about it's a 50-acre site, 1 billion DKK master plan, And the park aims to open community dialogue on resource use, climate awareness. So these are basically demonstrations. So it's not only about the theory, but it's about demonstrating, using programs to demonstrate certain kinds of understanding or learnings. Okay, and then it creates your public appeal with the municipal infrastructure. So you really break the barrier which is there between the public infrastructure and the people, but you try and invite the people in such a way that they experience the whole system altogether. This is the entire project wherein you have, this entire water streams that are coming into this pond. This is the section that's cut across this entire, where this is the water treatment facility that you can see, and then you can see there are these bridges over touching the roofs. Okay, you have a skylight because of the deep plan. There is a certain kind of a daylight which is needed. The way it cascades down and enters into this water body where you have access to, and otherwise how this is like a built space as such. So this is how it looks like. So this bridge is basically uh, yeah, the bridge that happens between the two buildings, which is this bridge. Okay, this is this bridge. And so these grasslands that you see are basically swales to channelize the surface runoff. It's a very minimalistic kind of a building with a glass facade, and then you can access the roof, which becomes like a green roof onto the top. You can see the channel now that runs across, and these are the staircases that gets within the access to the terraces. This is how the terrace looks like, and because it's a deep plant, they have created these kinds of uh, lights, north lights, which enters and gives a certain amount of daylight within. Just see how the entire bridge just sits onto this roof. The kind of finishes that have been given onto the roof, because it's a green roof. At the same time, there are gravels as well. There are pathways that walk, and then you become the part of the landscape altogether. There is a small creek that trickles through the central channel, passing through the narrow garden. This demonstrates how the natural foliage cleans and filters the groundwater. For visitors passing through, this installation is an organic contrast to the industrial presence of the water treatment plant, promoting reflection on the functional and environmental footprint of the public utility. So instead of going for the chemical treatments, you can actually look at the natural treatments which are there. It also talks about capable of treatment plants which are capable of expanding its processing capacity, and for the future growth in and around it is capable of recycling the phosphorus and producing biomass heat energy from the wastewater that it takes. Because it's very in close proximity to the industrial park, the presence of phosphorus must be higher. It also talks about future communities which will be able to explore a landscape that provides recreation, a connection to nature, and an everyday education in climate awareness. This is how it looks like when the autumn or a spring, and this is just the aerial view of the whole site. It's basically it's a model that is being created, but that's the real time picture. So one was at the city level, which is on the outskirts. This is the earlier one was at the neighborhood level that you can create, and this is actually a building level example wherein you look at an architectural building, and whatever plot that you have, how do you harvest and how do you look at the entire water feature. So this is basically it's an applied research and development facility, Arizona, USA. It's a green building, definitely. A lot of features are being evident enough to show it's a green building. And it has this kind of a central water park kind of a thing, which is cascading. It's like a terraced kind of a thing, where they look at a water body which is right there, and it's a huge water body. So instead of creating a water harvesting tank and making it a boring procedure, they what they have done is they wanted to celebrate the entire water feature. So but the water feature is not going to be there throughout 365 days. So they had created these different terraces depending on the water that gets collected, and over a period of time, as it recedes, there are other functions that can start taking up these spaces over a period of time. So it basically, you have your entrance, you have the reception, the water feature that happens, the gallery and all. This is your conference room, which is there, which is actually overlooking the another meeting room, which is there overlooking this water body. At the periphery, you have the alternate constructed wetlands which are there. The external texture is nothing but more like a Broadway walk that has been created, so that, or it's more like a plinth where you can actually use it to just sit and overlook the water body. This is the entire water cycle. So the water cycle that comes from the roof, it comes from the downtakes. Okay, at the periphery, it runs through the periphery. Okay, and then it gets recharges and then enters into the kind of a retention pond, which is being there at the center. And from the retention pond, it is pumped up to the stormwater system, which is there at the campus level. This is a thing which is talking about the rainwater harvesting, where you have the detention pond, which is there, but it also talks about how the wastewater gets recycled. Okay, so it talks about minimum standards is 2 to 1 gallon per day, while in using in reclaimed main, it's 952 gallons per day. So basically, you're saving 57% of the potable water consumption, which is huge. And then you have dual low flush toilets, waterless urinals. You're looking around 300 people average population. The shower facilities are also being given in the restroom core, and then there are separate systems for the laboratory drainage, definitely, because there will be a certain kind of wastage material or chemicals that are going to get involved in it. uh, this is talking about how the energy strategy is also being there, in terms of, how much chilled water or the heating system that you use. Basically, they do have a radiant heating system. They also have a solar thermal system which has been employed. So when we are actually looking at the energy efficient building systems, we'll be discussing these in details of it. So this talks about, your passive design techniques along with your active design techniques, wherein if this entire glass space gets heated, it's more in terms of the corridor, but you can actually see there are these blinds which are also being there. So the fabric, just stops the solar insulation that happens. Yes. Thank you. Any questions regarding anything you all have regarding the water integrated systems?
Ma'am, Pranit here. Actually, what was the
Yes.
name of that first project, that American project you have shown?
Stephen Hall's Stephen Hall project. You're asking regarding the water system recycling?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's a Stephen Hall's project. It's the Whitney Purification Center. WHITNEY, Whitney Water Purification Center.
Thank
It's Stephen Hall and Michael van Valkenburg. He's the landscape
Yeah,
architect.
he's the landscape architect, right?
You know,
Sorry for
even
the bias.
I have the same example. So don't worry,
Yes, but
Pranit.
you get into the details of it. I
No,
just
no.
want to
It
actually.
was it was an ASLA award winner in 2010, if I'm right. It was like touted as one of the best projects in the last decade. That the Whitney Water Center that you showed.
Yeah, it's a beautiful project. So, any questions, guys? No questions? Okay, I'm just going to stop the recording.